Hello and welcome to our tutorial. In this tutorial we're going to look at making a very simple kind of dungeon file or kind of dungeon-esque kind of environment. We're going to use kind of minimum amount of geometry and it's a very few and small textures if we can. So get started here. My plan is to make a small dungeon with pillars in it and a sort of a bridge, gapping or bridging sort of a chasm sort of area. So let me just turn on a few things here. Just going to take this and go to wireframe, and actually we'll take it all and scale it by 0.5. So AS 0.5. Okay, and then we'll bring this down, and so that's going to be the base of our pillar. And what we're going to do is we're going to have a look at this in terms of unwrapping it and putting textures etc on it. Now we're going to beat it up a little bit because it's meant to be a pillar that's worn and old, and then we'll look about duplicating it and how we make it look like it's more than one thing. So first of all, we want to beat it up a little bit. So there's loads of different ways to do that, but the easiest thing for me to do is to sculpt it. Now we're going to end up with lots of geometry, but then we'll decimate the geometry and make it a low polygon model again. So we'll go into solid mode, and from here we'll go to map cap, and we'll just turn this guy on here. We'll go to sculpt mode, and we'll turn on the dynamic topology, and that just lets us add geometry as we sculpt as opposed to moving geometry that's already there. I'll press F here, make this a bit bigger, and as you can see here I've got an X mirror modifier on, so it's going to mirror on either side of this green line, so across the X-axis. So I'm going to turn that off so it can kind of be unique either side. So what I want to do is basically dint this to make it look like it's weathered and worn. Now the way this works is the closer you zoom in, the more detailed. So you can see here the triangles are bigger. So down here they're smaller because I'm closer in this viewport to the actual surface of the model. So that's actually how this works. So the closer you get, the more detail you add, which is great, but it also means that you can write over detail. If you zoom out and draw now, you'll lose all that detail. So you have to be sort of careful about how you do it exactly. Okay, so we're going to try and preserve some of the corners, so it's not all beaten up. And so we're going to use these not just, so this obviously this is going to be on the ground, this pillar here, but we will have we'll have ample opportunity to look at the bottom of this the way I intend to use it, as well as the top. So we need to not just do the top part of this. Okay, so nearly there. And there's no perfection in this, we're just doing something simple. Okay. So this is our beaten up piece of marble slash I don't know, rock of some sort, and we're going to use that as the base of our pillar, and we're going to kind of duplicate this a lot. So I know I'm going to get out of object mode or sculpt mode into object mode. We'll shade smooth, maybe we'll add a subsurface modifier, and we can see that it's, you know, as it adds that, it's going to be like an interesting sort of slightly organic looking object. So that's not bad at all, but it's 75,000 verts. So if we have like 15 pillars and they're, we duplicate this 6 high, we're going to have an extraordinary amount of geometry that's, not usable in a game, or not effective in a game. So I'm going to remove the subdivision surface modifier because it's not going to help us at all. We're back down to 12,000 verts, which is still too many. I'm going to go into decimate, and we've got a ratio here. So if I've got 12,000 verts, if I put this at 0.1, I'll have 1,200 verts. So it's sort of like I can tell it how much of this I want to see. So you can see now I've got down here 1,200 verts, and while this has definitely lost a whole bunch of detail, it will be much more manageable in our game. Now at 1,200 verts for one block, that's still too many. So I'm going to apply that, and I'm going to add another decimate modifier. Now I could have just kept going lower on the other one, but I find it easier just to add a second. So I'm going to half this. Okay, it's not too bad, and we're at 600, and maybe we'll say 0.25, and now we're at 300. Okay, we've got a little anomaly there. We'll fix that. So we're going to apply that. We'll press G here and get rid of that as best we can, and that's going to be our block. So I'm going to go to the UV UV unwrapping for this, and we'll hit A, and all of that geometry is in this one kind of dot here, which is of no use to us. So what I want to do is I am going to unwrap this. So I'm going to just, and it's a little laborious, but I'm going to go around. It's not, if I was doing this with 12,000 verts, I'd have a lot more to select, but I'm just going to gently select, maybe go to edge select here, the outside of this, and we're going to unwrap this cube by basically drawing seams on it, and the seams will be the point where the cube is unwrapped. So I'm going to go Control E for the edge menu and mark seam, and you can see it's gone red there, and I need to basically replicate that across the cube. And it's important not to leave a gap. If I leave a gap, like if I missed this one and continued on here, then this side face and the top would be connected, which won't be a crime, but it would mean that it wouldn't unwrap correctly. Hopefully that'll make a bit more sense when it's all unwrapped. And so this is the slow part of the journey. Hopefully you'll see it move on a little bit quicker shortly. So Control E, mark seam, and then we'll do the same over here. I could spend a lot more time doing this and make it a bit more like I would hide the seam a little better. So when our textures join together, when the image from one side joins to the other, maybe it'll be a little less obvious. But anyway, we'll try that. So Control E, mark seam. We'll do this side here. And nearly there. So join that one and then do the bottom. That one. So Control E, mark seam. So we should be able to cut all this out. So I'm going to press A and then U and unwrap. And this is it unwrapped here. Now that's fine, and there's no problem with that. But we need to bring in some textures and see what that looks like. So I'm just going to switch this to my shader editor, and I'm going to load in some images. Now the images I'm using I've downloaded from a free site. So I'm going to bring in an image texture, and it's going to be a stone texture that I want to use. So oops, this one here. So this is for color. I'm going to connect my color to my base color, and then I'm going to select this one and go Shift D and duplicate it. And this one is going to be the roughness, and we'll put that into, I'm just going to hit N here and get rid of that. So I'm going to put this into my roughness, and then finally I'm going to go image texture, and then I'm going to go to vector and normal map. So a normal map is like a bump map, so it'll if you're not familiar with them, they kind of fake sort of a raised surface, and they are a funny looking image, which is this one here, my normal map. But I don't want color image, I want non-color. So if I very quickly just jump here, so you'll see that it's unwrapped, and that's not too bad at all. Now the only problem I have with this is the scale of it. So there's a couple of ways to deal with that. So I'm going to look from this side here. I'm going to go to face select mode and press L. Actually, Shift A first and then L. And then I'm going to go U unwrap. So this is now has kind of filled the space. So I'm going to go Control 1. I'm going to do the same on the other side. So we will press L again over this surface, comme ça, and unwrap this one. And oh, I have two there. That's not what I wanted to do. So let's do that again. So L, so Control 1 and U and unwrap. Then Shift A. Same on this side. L, U, unwrap. Shift A, press number 3, L, U, unwrap, Shift A, Control 3, L, U, unwrap, and then we want to look from the top and from the bottom. Now, they're not all going to join properly together, so there's going to be sort of a, this won't merge perfectly, but you can see it doesn't actually look bad at all. So there's a seam here which isn't exactly beautiful, but because it's a rock, we'll kind of get away with it. So that's our kind of, it may seem quite a small and insignificant addition to our game, but we're going to make an awful lot out of this. So first thing I'm going to do is make a pillar. So I'm going to go into edit mode, select it all, go Shift D and then escape, and GZ1, so slightly too high, so GZ minus 0.5. So I've stacked this, and then I'm going to press SY and then hold down Shift and then 0.5. Nope, I did that wrong. Let's do that again. So SX 0.5 and then SY 0.5. So I'm going to do that way. Now you can see the compression here hasn't worked, so I'm just going to very quickly do the same again. So L, U, unwrap, L, U, unwrap, L, U, unwrap, L, U, unwrap, and from the top, L, U, unwrap, and then just to press L and then H for hide, and then look from the bottom, and L and unwrap. Okay, so we'll look from the side, Alt H to unhide, and Alt A to unselect or deselect everything. So that gives us a better, that'll look better than what we had. So I could, if I go back here to, if I press L here and get this whole block, I could probably press S here, say 0.5, and then the scale of this rock to this would be the same throughout. So we'll probably do that there. Not the most efficient way of doing it, but we just want them to match. Okay, so that's now the first part of our pillar. But we can see that sort of there's a mirroring of of geometry. So what we'll do is we'll press L on this one, and we'll go OR Z 90. And we're going to go Shift D, G Z 0.5, and then OR Z 90. And that's not quite right there, so we'll just shift it a little bit by hand. And then we'll go Shift D again, Escape, GZ 0.5, and then OR Z 90. I'll do it one more time, so Shift D, GZ 0.5, and then OR Z 90. And again, we'll just shift it back a little bit. So now we've got our pillar, and we don't want it to be too wonky. Okay, so that's going to be our first pillar in our game, and we can see we've got 1500 verts in it, which is quite a lot for a pillar, but it's gonna look good. And then the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to press L, and I'm going to go Shift D, and GZ, this needs to be 2.5, and then we're going to go OR Z 180, and we'll move it, and move it. And we should probably rotate it 180 this way as well, so we'll go OR 180. That's going to move this by I. Fine. Okay, so that's our pillar. And I need to rotate it 90 degrees so it's offset. Okay, so that's going to be the a support pillar in our dungeon. So if I add in a generic cube here, so there's my cube and GZ1. So this here is 2 meters or 6 feet tall in old money. So our dungeon's not going to be very big. And if this is 2.5 meters or so in height, then it gives you an idea of the scale of these rocks. So the scale is not unbelievable. And the character's eye line will be about this middle block here, maybe in between the two of these. So I'm going to take this here, and I'm going to spread it out. So I'm going to go Shift D, I'm in object mode now, and I'm going to go GX2. And do the same again, so Shift D, GX2, and one more time, Shift D, GX2. And again, just to be consistent, I'm going to rotate this 90 degrees, I'm going to rotate this 180 degrees, and I'm going to rotate this 270 degrees, so that they're not all the same. And I'm going to very simply select them all and go Control J, so they're a single object. I could have done that in edit mode, but it's just the same. Now I'm going to take this and go Shift D, G, Y, and we'll say 6. So it's the other side of the room. And then I'm going to take this and I'm going to go Object Mirror on the Y-axis. So it's sort of, they're facing each other. And then again, just so there's no, the character doesn't feel like this divot here and this divot here are mirrored, we'll just go in and in wireframe here, we'll just try and mix it up a little bit. So we'll rotate that 90, and we'll rotate that 180, and we'll rotate this one 90, and rotate that one 180. Okay. So that is my the pillars either side of my main corridor. Now, what I want to do now is I'm going to make a floor to kind of sit this in, and I'm going to do that simply by going Shift A and adding a plane. And the plane is so that's going to be my basic floor tile. So I'm going to take this plane, I'm going to extrude it on Z by -0.1, and then I'm going to scale it by 1.1, so it's a slightly bigger. I don't need this bottom face, so I'm going to delete the bottom face, so that's my geometry there. I'm going to take it all, scale it back a little bit so that it fits into its original kind of box. And so to there. And then I'm going to press U and unwrap, and we can see it here. And I'm going to put the same material on this. I'm going to put the, which is called material, we'll call this stone 1. And we'll just have a look at the base color. And we will turn on our... So we can see that this is, in terms of scale, it's not far off, but you know, if we made it a little bit bigger, the scale might be a bit better. So I'm going to scale this by 1.5 on the floor, and that's not too bad. Now what I'm going to do is, so the material here and the material here are the same, and I don't want the floor to look exactly the same. So I'm going to create a new material, but what Blender does by default is it duplicates the one that you have. So now I'm going to have stone 1 and stone 2. So if I turn this into my shader, so stone 1 and stone 2 are exactly the same, but I'm on stone 2 now. You can see it here. I'm just going to move this back, and I'm going to add in a under color, a brightness and darkness node, and I'm just going to make this a tiny bit darker, and you can see it's, you know, profoundly changed the material. So now what I want to do is I want to roll that out across my dungeon floor. Now what I should probably do is repeat the process that I did with this one, sort of scuff it up and make it not a perfect floor tile. But you've seen how I've done that with the other pillar, so you can do that yourself if you want. So I'm going to go into edit mode this time and go Shift D, GY2. And I'm going to rotate this 90 degrees just so that the texture kind of changes. So Shift D first, and then GY2. And rotate that 90 degrees, and then Shift D, GY2, and rotate it 90 degrees. So that's my kind of basic floor. Now, as I look at it, it's sort of, this is too deep. The player could actually trip up on that. So I'm just going to move this up. We're going to do it by eye. I've selected them all, so I'm going to go GZ and bring that to, say, there. So while we can still see it, it's not as physically deep between the two. Now, I'm going to select everything and go Shift D, GX2, and we will, again, we want to change this a little bit so it's not a complete repeat. So we'll rotate it 180 degrees, Shift D2, and we will, with this one, we'll go Mesh Mirror on X, and then we'll go Shift D, GX2, and again we'll just rotate this one 180 degrees, so we're slightly more limited in what we can do. Just again trying to break up any repeat pattern that we might see, and there's plenty of them there, but so far so good. We've literally got we've made two objects, one rock and one floor tile, and we have just duplicated, and we've only one texture, or we've one material effectively. So as I look at this again, it looks, these tiles look too big. So I'm going to select everything and go S.5, and then let's see if we can move this to here, and again we'll try and arrange it so that it's nicely positioned. I'm going to, in edit mode, just select that vert there and go Shift S, cursor to selected, and then I'm going to duplicate this using a modifier. So I'm going to say add modifier, mirror, and I want a mirror modifier on Y and on X. But the problem here is that the point at which it's going to do the mirror modifier is the origin of the object, which is over here. So I'm going to say object set origin to 3D cursor, and now that's now my floor, which looks better. The scale of those tiles is more realistic. And as we look at this, the specularity is way too high, and on that one. Okay. So, a little look at what it actually looks like when we render it. Okay, so that is not too bad. So the next thing I want to do is create a sorry, I'm just, wow, that's not what I wanted. That's definitely not what I wanted. So 0. So I just have to play here and see what I can get. Yeah, I don't like any of these. And why is that so? Let's disconnect you and see what we've got. Why is that so pale? Oh, that's fine. Okay. And that's quite a dramatic change. Okay, so let's need to use a much smaller number. There we go. Something like that. Right, so I will move on from that and not get lost in detail, because that's not what this is about. And we'll turn down the brightness of that. Okay, so what we want to do next is we want to make sort of this look like it's inside a cave. So I'm going to take this here. So this is my floor tile, and I'm going to go Shift S, cursor to selected, and then I'm going to add a new plane, and I will go into edit mode, and I'm going to go Alt M and merge these at the center. And then here I'm going to select the very last one here, Shift S, cursor to selected, and then select this dot and make sure it's selected. I'm going to extrude and then go Shift S, selection to cursor. So just sort of drawing a line down the side there. I'm going to subdivide this a few times, which is just adding in more geometry. So let's say 5 times. And then with it all selected, it's going to look down the side, and I'm going to go E to extrude, extrude, and I'm just trying to randomly extrude this as if it were a cave. Okay, so there's my my extrusions, and I'm going to take them, hit A, and I'm going to subdivide that one more time. So I've got quite a bit of geometry, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say mesh, transform, and then randomize, and it's sort of going to push things backwards and forwards for me. I'm going to undo that for one moment, and I'm going to deselect this line here at the side and that line, because I want to be able to kind of loop this. So I'm going to let these ones go mesh, transform, randomize, and then I get to decide how much I want it to push forward and back and deform. So I'll take this bottom line again, and I'm going to say SY0. So let's try and straighten that up. SZ0, so it's back to being a straight line. Okay, so that's sort of now my kind of base for this, and I can shade it smooth if I want. And what I'm interested in now is unwrapping this and adding a material to it the way we did with the pillars. So I'm going to select this line here, and that's going to be where I add my seam. So I'm going to go mark seam, and let's unwrap this. So I'm going to press go to face select mode and press L and go U unwrap, and I'm going to go to my materials and add a new material, and we're going to call this cave wall. I'm just going to pause for a second and drink some tea. Excellent. Now, so let's go over here to my UV image editor, and you can see it's unwrapped it. And now I'm going to jump back to the shader, and this is my new cave wall. So I'm going to go Shift A, texture, image texture, and I'm going to kind of repeat what I did before. So I'm going to hit open, and I am looking for this texture here. Again, these were just downloaded from a free texture website, and they're seamless, which is important, so they can loop without you seeing exactly where they join together. Although this won't be perfect here, but that's fine. So there's my base color, so I'm going to open that one, and again we're going to connect color to color. I will duplicate that, so Shift D, and we will add in the roughness, and we can put that to there, and then I'm going to Shift D again, and this time I'm going to be adding in the normal map, how bumpy it is, and between this non-color image and the normal map I need to kind of convert it from one type of information to another. So I go yellow to yellow and purple to purple. There we go. Now we can determine the strength of it. So if I actually go into rendered mode on this side, we can turn up and down this sort of fake bumpiness. 9 is a very high number. So that's our cave wall at the moment, and we haven't unwrapped the. So I'm going to press L for the, actually Shift A and then L, and I'm going to look from the top, and I'm going to unwrap that. Now you can see that they're kind of traveling in opposite directions. So I'm going to go back to my UV editing window. I'm going to select all of these and rotate them 90 degrees, and that way we should have a continuation of sort of the rock formation up and down the wall. Okay, so so far so good. If we remember, what we had was for the floor here we have to put the origin in the middle, and then we could map it across. So we're going to do that again, only with this top piece here. So I'm going to go into edit mode, and I want to take this line of verts here. I'm going to press SY0. Oops, that's not what I wanted. So I only want that front line. So I'm going to go wireframe and see. I'm sure actually there's a simpler way to do this, but just deselect everything except that line. So SY0, SZ0, so it's flat. And what I'm interested in is selecting this dot here, or this vertex here. So I'm going to go for GY, just move that to the correct location, select that and go Shift S, cursor to selected. And then we can go Object, Set Origin, Origin to 3D Cursor. So now the pivot point or the origin of the object is here. And then we can kind of repeat that technique where we go Mirror, and on Y, I'm just going to turn on Clipping, which stops it from overlapping. So that is our current kind of cave. Now I need to kind of fill in the back of it, and I want to duplicate the whole thing and add in a little kind of chasm as well. So let's see how we would go about doing that. Before we do that, I just want to finish this bit here. So if we look at this, if I press A, so I'm looking at 325 verts, which is fantastic in terms of it's not a huge vert count, but that is multiplied 4 times. So we've got 1,000 or so, or 1,200 or so. So we could reduce the vert count on that. I think I feel like I'm going to leave it for now and not worry about it too much. But we're going to come back and duplicate or make a second kind of mesh that will be our collision mesh for the game engine. So what I want to do now is I want to sort of make almost like another rock that sits on top of this and joins the pillar to the ceiling here. So I'm going to add in a cube, and I'm going to scale it by 0.5. Oops, minus 0.5. And I'm going to try and move it over here just by eye. So I'm going to do that. Maybe make it slightly bigger. And we're going to move it up on the Z-axis. And I'm going to take these guys here and go GZ. So it kind of protrudes through the roof, but it doesn't actually go very far. So, and it's unwrapped here already, but we want it. I'm going to be joining this to the other to the cave object. So I'm just going to move this. I'm going to go G again, just doing it kind of by eye and moving that there. I'm going to place its origin where the 3D cursor is, so set origin to 3D cursor. So again, I can use mirror modifiers and duplicate, etc. I'm going back into edit mode, and I'm going to subdivide it a good bit. So I'm going to go edge, subdivide, and maybe 3 times, say 4 times. I'm going to go to solid mode, and I don't need any of these. So hit C here. So I do need those ones, kind of, not really, but we'll leave them in. And I'm going to go X vertices, and then I'm going to select it all, and again I'm going to use this tool again, mesh transform randomize, just to kind of so that it's not so it doesn't look like a cube. And I'm also going to now use to sphere to kind of round it up a little bit. And can do that. Okay, and then finally I'm going to take, as we did with the pieces below us, I'm just going to try and add seams here. So I'm going to go back into wireframe mode, and I'm going to go Control E, mark seam, and let's see if I can select that and that and that. Control E, mark seam, and then there and there. Control E, mark seam. Take the whole thing and unwrap it. And instead of having it here on the stone wall base, we wanted to have the cave wall material. So that's it there. And the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take maybe a loop there. I'm going to turn on proportional editing, and I'm going to press S and just scale it up a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to press L here and go from the top, go back to wireframe, and I'm going to go Shift D. I'm going to move it on the x-axis to here. I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees, and I'm just going to grab one vert, and because I've got proportional editing turned on, I can sort of really distort sort of the shape of this quite a bit. I'm going to do the same with this one, so it's not quite so uniform or kind of boxy, so it looks like a genuine part of the cave, maybe that somebody dug out. Okay. Alright, so then from this here, again, we can use our mirror modifier. So I can go mirror and then Y, and now I can connect sort of the cave roof to these pillars. So I'm going to take these objects here, and I'm going to select this here, and I'm going to go Control J. Because they're sharing the same sort of modifier, I didn't need to apply any of them first. So that's not too bad. Not perfect, and it's definitely not a AAA game, but it's not that bad. Okay, now we may end up adding a second layer of columns, but we'll worry about that anon. So I'm going to try and build onto this here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to apply this mirror modifier, which normally I wouldn't do. I try and keep the mirror modifiers on until the end because they're just helpful to have on as opposed to applying them. But I'm going to apply it this time, and I'm going to press L, and all of that is selected, which is not what I want. So I'm going to try and select just the bit that we had earlier, which is sort of that bit there. And I am going to press Shift D and just move it over by hand. And I'm going to take that line there and press X and vertices, and then L, L, and L, and delete all them. And then these ones here are the ones I'm interested in. So I'm going to rotate these 90 degrees. I'm going to turn off this proportional editing for a little while, and then I'm going to go G and place these about there. Now I'm going to take this line here and go SX0 and then GX, and just try and bring this along here and select the whole thing and go GY, bring it to the center, and then I'm going to turn back on proportional editing, but just turn on connected only so it doesn't move anything else. I'm going to select that last line there and go GY and just move that to there. Okay, so that's going to be my kind of chasm, and I haven't made the other side of it. And in fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into edit mode here, and I'm going to delete all of that because I'm going to add another mirror modifier. So I'm just going to build this on one side. So first I'm going to press L, and then L, and L, and L. And I'm going to go Shift D, GY. Oops. GY. Turn that off. I'm going to place that there, and I'm going to go Mesh mirror on the y-axis, so they're sort of facing each other. I'm going to take my pillars, select them all, and do the same. I'm going to go Shift D, G, Y, 2, nope, G, Y, yeah, 1.5, maybe 1.5, yeah. Okay. And I'm going to delete them. Now, let's have a look at what we've got. So we've got our side of the chamber, probably slightly too close. Yeah. So maybe we should take these. And we've got a wireframe. You can see I have planned this meticulously. Go GY, yeah, minus 0.3. Then we'll have to take this and this and that and that, and then go GY minus 0.3, just so maybe our character can walk in between them. Okay, so now what I need to do is I need to take this here and bring it forward. I like sort of duplicate it, so I'm going to go so Shift D and then press X and move that forward. Actually no, let me undo that. So what do I want to do? I want to have this wall continue on, but not that far, to about this line here. And I'm going to place this origin roughly where my mouse is now, and that's going to be the point where I'm going to put the mirror around. So let's have a look at how we'll do that. So we'll take our roof and our side, and then the roof, I'll have to delete some of the sides, so I'm going to press actually I will go back to what I had done there. So I'm going to go Shift D and X and move that up to here, and then I'm going to mirror this on the x-axis, so these actually will join together perfectly, and we will move this back, so G, X. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to delete everything from about there. We'll take this and we'll press SX0 so it's nice and flat. And as we look from the top, this is where, so Shift S, cursor to selected, that's where I'm going to mirror around. So let's add our mirror modifier. So we'll go mirror on Y and on X, but we need to move the mirror or the origin, so we'll say set origin to 3D cursor. Okay, and now what we need to do is delete part of this here. Oh, we don't have to, but I think it'll look better if we do. So I'm literally just gonna cut a hole here. I'm gonna go X vertices. Okay. Now let's take these guys and go set origin to 3D cursor, and then add in my mirror for them, and on Y select my floor, and I'm going to apply its mirror modifier first, and then I'm going to set its origin to 3D cursor, and then add another mirror modifier, and now I've got almost my scene complete. So let's go back to our modeling tab here and look through our camera. We'll select our camera, press N, go into view, lock camera to view, and we'll just sneak inside the world a little bit. Okay, and we'll take the camera, we'll make it a little bit a wider angle, say 24. And so this is what we're looking at in terms of our product at the moment. Now, if I need to name things, so this is, so these are the cave walls. These are the pillars. And that's all I really need, is it? Where's my floor? That's my floor. Now I do need to put a kind of a back and a, you know, I need to put a front and back on this. So so that's what we've got so far. I realize I haven't saved since I started, so I should do that. We'll just call this cave. Let's try that. There it is, our cave.blend. I'll take my light, I'll warm it up a tiny bit, and we'll then go to our world tab and we'll make the world a darker place. And we'll take this light and we'll duplicate it, so Shift D, and then we'll move it on X, move it down to the other end, and that's that's what we've got so far. Now I do want to build a bridge here, although I could have my character jump across, I suppose. But so let's do that. So let's go back to look dev, and you know, this is far from perfect here, so I need to take that line of verts, press SZ0, and then make sure they kind of go in under the floor. I might want to move these a bit closer so I don't get texture stretching. Okay, and yeah, that's all a little bit perfectly flat there, but we won't worry about it too much. So I'm going to take 1, 2, 3, yeah, those ones there, and maybe those ones there. So I'm going to extrude these out. Before I do that, I'm going to deselect that. I'm going to go Control E, mark seam, and then I'm going to extrude this. Now, actually, let me undo that. I will extrude that. I want to go to the mirror modifier. I want to turn on clipping so it stays joined in the middle. So I'm going to extrude these out and join them up there. And that didn't work in terms of keeping them joined in the middle, but we'll worry about that in a minute. And take that vert, I don't need that. I'm going to delete it and take both of them and go GY, so they're joined up. So that's all fine. And so with face select, I can press L and it'll just select this bit, and I can go U unwrap, and then it'll have a projection into the UV editing window, and maybe we'll make that a little bit higher. So there is my bridge of Carrickdoom. So GY, let's make sure these all join up. Okay, that's not too bad at all. Now I could take the tiles and put them across, but I think I'll just leave it kind of raw like that. Okay, so the last thing we'll do is we'll just kind of seal this into a kind of a self-contained level. And that's literally taking sort of this chasm area here and putting it at the back. So let's do that very quickly. So I'll press L and Shift D. Oops, actually turn off clipping and lose that down here. And obviously I don't want the bridge part of it, so I'm just going to delete them. And that. And I do want to fill, okay, L, hide. In fact, I can just go L and then, there we go. So this whole thing here, I need to turn clipping back on and go GY, which means I need to do that up here as well. Where are you? select all of that, including that one, and press F for a face. And do I need to unwrap that again? I do. So U unwrap, and I'm just going to very quickly where is this cliff? I'll go back to it and look dev. So I just want to get the scale of this right. So it's a slightly different scale to the rest of it. So that sort of fits in there. That's fine. And so what we're going to do with this is, instead of it kind of curving down, we want it to curve in. And then the same with you. Okay, so I'm going to press Alt H, L. I'm going to scale this on X a little bit, so it's a bit flatter. And I move this up sort of into kind of relative position. And we can go G, X, and again we'll select all of that, and G, Y, so it joins together. So I'm going to turn back on my proportional editing, but make sure it is connected only, so it doesn't change the shape of the wall. And again, G, I'm going to rotate it, and G, okay. So that's not too bad, and then I just need to kind of secure this edge here. So I'll rotate that, and then move it through. Now, there are definitely better ways to do that, but for what we're doing, that will definitely do. So why can I see nothing? Oh, I probably put that in front of my camera. Yep, that's what I did. Fantastic. Okay, so we'll just, I'm gonna, I have my Blender set up to have a shortcut I think has been changed. So Shift F on my keyboard will let me basically have an FPS, like kind of float around as if I was in a game. And that's just in your preferences keyboard settings. I think it's view navigation, I think is the what you need to do. Okay, so again, far from perfect, but not bad. Okay, so that is our world. That is the level, or the piece that we're going to make. So I'm just going to save that. And then the last thing we're going to do in this tutorial, because we're 58 minutes in, so a very long tutorial, the last thing we're going to do is we are going to bring this into Unity. So let's do that. So here we are in Unity, and it's a completely blank project, so I was going to jump back to Blender. So before I start going into Unity, we're going to look at how we get stuff out of Blender. So this is our little world. So when we're in Unity, we'll need meshes for collision, and this whole world has 70,000 verts, which is fine. It's not in any way taxing or compared to most modern games, but we do want to try and reduce the kind of burden on the processor, particularly if we're going to a phone, as much as possible. So just to be efficient, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in a cube. I'm going to go into edit mode, press G, turn this off first, and place this over my pillar and scale it down till it is the right size. And again, if you have time, you can spend more time than I do on this. And the more you do, the more the more accurate it is, the better the experience is for the player. So I'm going to take that and go GZ. So this is going to be my collision box for this pillar. So it has 8 verts and not the 400 or so that were in it. So I can go Shift D, GX, move it to there. Do the same again, Shift D and X, Shift D and X. Take the whole thing, Shift D and Y, and then we can use our mirror modifier on Y, and now we have collision for all of these pillars. So I'm going to rename this object. I'm going to call it pillar collision. Okay, and the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do something similar with the floor. So I'm going to hide that, hide my pillars, and hide the walls. So again, this object here, when I select it all, has 480 verts, but all I really need is 4. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. Shift D, so I've duplicated them. I'm going to press P and go separate by selection. So now I've made this floor.001. I'm going to edit mode and A, select all 4 of them, and then press F. So that's now a face, so it's a plane. And that's going to be my floor collision. Now we're not going to see this in the game, we're just going to use it as a collision object. So this will be there just for eye candy, and this will be here for collision. Now I'm not going to do the same with the walls. What I could do is I could make this sort of cliff area and the bridge. I could make the wall mesh. I could simplify that and optimize it for the game, but just for now I'm going to leave that because it'll take too long. So with all those things done, we're going to look at how many objects we have in our game and how we're going to get them into Unity. So I don't have that many objects, I've only a couple. So I'm going to do my cave walls here, and I'm going to go File, Export, FBX. I'm going to put this onto my desktop, and you can see here I've played with this before. So let's make a new folder, and we'll call this FBX objects, and we'll go in there, and we'll call this cave walls. And the most important part of this is to make sure you click selected only, or selected objects only. So out we go. So that's my cave walls. Now I'm going to go export FBX, and this is going to be my pillar collision. Now it's remembered that I had selected objects selected, so I can just hit output on that. I want to output the actual pillars themselves, so export FBX. And the reason I'm bringing them all out as separate objects is because it'll give me much more control over them, which you'll see in a minute in Unity. So there's the pillars. I need to get my floor. That's my floor collision. So file, export, FBX, and this will be my floor collision. And then last but not least, the actual floor itself. So file, export, FBX, and floor. Now you'll note I don't need the camera or the lights or anything like that. And like I said, they're deliberately not as a single object. So let's go into Unity and let's import all these objects. So let's go import new asset, and we'll go to our desktop and our FBX objects, and we'll take all of them and import them. That won't take too long, and then let's throw them into Unity and see what it looks like. So we'll bring in the pillars, the pillar collision, the floor, floor collision, floor, and cave walls. Now there's a couple of things to note, and we'll fix these and export them again. So I can see from immediately that there's a couple of problems here. So I'm going to put the camera inside of my cave area, and you can see that I can see the pillar. So let me just take this pillar collision turn that off. So I can see the pillars. I can see the pillar collision. Can I see the floor? I cannot see the floor, but I can. Yeah, I can see the floor from underneath. And I can see the cave walls from the outside, but not from the inside. And that's just a normal issue. So let's pop back into Blender and fix that. So we'll start with the floor. So I'm going to go into edit mode, select all, and go up here and say show me the normals. And the normals are facing in many directions, but most of them are facing down. So I'm going to go mesh, normals, flip. So now it's pointing inside. No, they're not all facing inside. Interesting. Oh, and that's because I flipped them. Aha. I have undone myself. So all the ones that are pointing down, I need to take those and go mesh, normals, flip. And which ones are still going down? So that one, so I've got a face select here, that one, and that, and that. So if I don't flip these correctly, not that one, oops, not that one. If I don't flip them correctly, they will be invisible in Unity. Now there are other ways to fix them. Okay, so I need to select that and that and that. Nope, I'm wrong. It's not those ones. It's these ones. So sorry about this. This is not what I intended it to be doing. I'm nearly there though. So, but if I don't, it's good to see, I suppose, an error. So when you encounter stuff yourself, you can fix it. So mesh, normals, flip, and I think everything's pointing inward. It is. So again, I'm just going to repeat file, export data, FB. Oop, I think I hit the wrong thing there. Oh, STL. I am not going to 3D print it. So export FBX, and this is my floor. So there it is. And then I have to do the same with the walls. So if I go into edit mode here, again, you can see some of them are perfect and some of them not so perfect. So, and that's to do with me playing with adding bits together, etc. So let's just go into solid mode and see what bits are up and what bits are down. So this bit here is fine. That there, if I go to face select, yep, so that and that need to be flipped. So I need to go mesh, normals, flip, and then everything else is correct. So again, file, export, FBX, and these are my cave walls, and out I go. And then in Unity, I'm going to delete them here. So delete the floor, delete the cave walls, delete the floor, yes, and delete the cave walls, and then just re-import them. So import new asset, and cave walls, and floor. And we'll drag them in. 1 and 2. And it looks wrong now from up here, but looks correct from in here. Okay, so so let's have a look at what we're going to do here. So let's color it in, do our texture. So we're an hour and 10 minutes in, we might as well go a little bit further. So let's color it in and make it look as best we can like it looks like in Blender, and get some collision going, and we'll get the I'm not online, am I not? I am not online. Why am I not online? And let's see if I can fix that. I'm online now. Maybe. Let's see if we can. Let's reload you. See if that works. If it doesn't, that doesn't matter. I need to get my standard assets, but I can do that in the next tutorial, just to bring in the FPS controller. But we'll work on with coloring stuff in. So let's import more assets, and we're going to go to, where am I going to go to? In here. So I'm going to find my textures here. So the first one I was using, I think, was called Stone Wall. So it was no, not that one. Stone Wall 1. That one. So I want to bring in the base color, I want to bring in the normal map, and I want to bring in the roughness. They're the three things that we used. I'll probably end up using two of them initially. So I'm going to create a new folder just to organize myself. I'll call this FBX, and then another one, create folder, and we'll call this textures. And we'll also put the materials in there. So we'll take those three and we'll drop them into textures, and we'll take our FBXs and drop them in there just to organize ourselves. So then in textures I want to import the other ones. So we used the cliff, which is this top one here, and we brought in again the normal map and the roughness. Okay, so in my textures folder here I'm going to create a material. We'll call this cliff, and then we'll create another one and material, and we'll call this stone. Stone is fine. So in stone we want the base color, so I drag and drop that to there, and we'll drag the normal map in here, and we'll worry about smoothness in a minute. And the cliff will do the same. We'll drop the base color in here into albedo, and then normal into normal map. And then we'll just work that out over here. So the cave walls, they should have the cliff texture on them, and the floor, that should have the stone texture on it, and then the pillars should also have stone, and we'll worry about making variations of that. The pillar collision shouldn't have a renderer at all. We shouldn't see them, but it does need physics. So I'm going to go add component, physics, and then mesh collider. So now this is invisible, but these green boxes indicate that it has collision. The floor I can see, and it has its mesh, but it shouldn't have collision. And then this floor collider, we don't want to see it, but we do want it to have a mesh collider. So now we have collision on the floor. And then finally the walls, the cave walls, we want to have this to have both. So we're going to go to physics and then mesh collider, and that'll be the most expensive kind of mesh collider that we have. Now if I had the standard assets installed here in packages, which I don't, I would just drag an FPS controller in here, and we could walk around and have a look at what we can see. So we haven't done anything with the lighting here, so we've just got a generic sun. So I can turn this into a point light, like we did in when we were in Blender, and we'll make this global. We'll just put it in over our bridge, and yeah, so we'll set that over the bridge, and we'll go to our world sort of settings, go to where we'll say we want a solid color and we want it to be black, and let's go to our, let's see if we can find our lighting settings here. I'm just going to dock this window up here, and I'm going to say I don't want any light box, and this I want to go dark. So now we're getting closer to what we had when we were in Blender, so I can take this, and as we did in Blender, I'm going to duplicate it. I'm going to move this towards the camera, maybe down a little bit, and we're starting to see, I'm just going to, now when I press play, there is nothing to play, but you'll get a better idea of what it looks like. So not exactly the same as was in Blender. We're still missing how some specularity maps, and we're not moving around. But we're starting to get closer to what we had in terms of how it's going to look inside the game when we press play. Okay, so I'm going to stop there, and in the next tutorial we're going to get this working, and we're going to make a first-person rig, like an arm that goes in front of the camera, and drop that in and get the animations working in Unity and start making a game. So that's a long tutorial, but we'll leave it there for now.